Good afternoon, viewers from all around the world, and welcome to the first ever Happiness Summit, happening virtually from almost 10 countries and powered by Food for Thought. My name is Waleed Hatim, joining you from Cairo, Egypt. I'm an entrepreneur, a product enthusiast, and a consultant. I'm one of the co-founding members at Airgifter, a travel tech venture based in Egypt. And I'm also a strategy consultant at Forefront Consulting. As an entrepreneur and a consultant, and with this very dynamic lifestyle, one thing is always at stake, and that is peace of mind. In a world of unprecedented events and financial turbulence, all what we truly need is finding our peace of mind, not from the world around, but from within. Today, the Happiness Summit will include multiple panels discussing how to boost our happiness and well being in various areas of life. Our topic for this panel is Introduction to Positive Psychology. Here to talk to us about this critical topic, all the way from the United States and Canada, are two very special and inspiring guests, or might I say, positive gurus. Please welcome Braco Pobric and Lisa Sansom. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Welcome, Lisa. Welcome, Braco. Very nice to meet you. So I'm sure our viewers are very intrigued to get to know both of you after seeing your very strong LinkedIn profiles. So, ladies first, let me start with Lisa. So I would love to hear more about what you're doing. Briefly, kindly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what drew you to positive psychologies and whether positive psychology is related currently to the field of work that you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Waleed. And I'm thrilled to be here. And hello to everybody around the world. So, my name is Lisa Sansom. I work in the field of organizational development and change management, and I bring positive psychology into everything that I do. So, very briefly, I've been in this field for a long time. I started out as a high school teacher, Waleed. I don't think we got to talk about that. My
Wow.
first career is that I was a French teacher and I taught high school for a whole bunch of years. And I noticed that when I focused on the strengths and what was working well with my students, things went better, but we didn't have that language at the time. I went back to school a bunch of years after that and I got my MBA. That's when I transitioned into organizational development and change management. And a lot of what I was doing was very deficit focused, but that's when I got introduced to the field of appreciative inquiry, which is a systems wide, positive based way of introducing change. Then I became a certified coach. And in my leadership coach training, I learned about strengths and helping people to move forward towards their goals, not just away from what was broken, not just jumping off of burning platforms like we had learned in the change management world. And then I finally got my official training in positive psychology. I went to the University of Pennsylvania in 2009, 2010, and did my master's degree in applied positive psychology. And that's when I discovered there was a name for this field. It turned out that a lot of the books I had been collecting over the years actually fit under this field of positive psychology, and I didn't even know it. So I
Wow.
graduated 12 years ago, pivoted everything I was doing in the coaching, speaking, and training into positive psychology and bringing that positive lens. And just a year and a half ago, I started doing a doctorate program. I'm now doing my own research into the field of positive feedback and how managers and leaders in the workplace can best deliver positive feedback to improve task performance and relationship quality. It's a very under-researched area. So that's been my journey so far.
Wow, that's quite the journey, quite astonishing. Thank you so much for that, Lisa.
Thank you.
Moving on to you, Greco. Almost 10 years of teaching experience in the field of positive psychology and changing the lives of more than 65,000 people. Wow, that's amazing. Please just tell us a little bit more about you so that our viewers can get to know you and what drew you also into positive psychology and relating it to your current field of work.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much for the invite. So happy to see Lisa and, of course, Waleed, you here. So let's see. So my name is Braco Pobric. A lot of people have trouble pronouncing my name. Please don't worry about it. However you pronounce, I'll be fine. I grew up in Bosnia, in Sarajevo, former Yugoslavia. I was an engineer back there, and I also had my own business. Came on business trip to US, and due to war, which we're not going to go into, I never went back and started my new life. So Now I lived in New York, moved to New Jersey, live here with my wife Nevenka and our cat Tobias. But what is the connection between positive psychology and what I do today in the entire career? I was executive in a number of financial Wall Street firms, and but in my spare time, as I would say, there was nights, weekends. I would teach other people. Past 10 years for positive psychology, but then also before that, I was a Dale Carnegie certified business coach and trainer, and that was really just for fun, because I that would just bring me my own happiness. And now I'm a founder of a Life Success Academy, where we have about 20 online programs that I created over the past 20 years, most of them based on positive psychology. And I would say the flagship program is Positive Psychology Master Coach, PPMC, which the founder of Food for Thought, Waleed, as you know, graduated from. I believe he was in cohort 3, and right now we teach in cohort 7. So what drove me, truly, I believe that I happen to have more optimistic genes. So like I've been doing pretty well on that level myself, but I realized that so many people don't. And I wanted to see what can I learn so that I can help other people become happier, improve their well-being, become even more successful in life. That's why I call this Life Success Academy, and also help organizations so that they can help their employees become healthier. And at the same time, as we know, every company is there to improve their bottom line. So I kind of connected that with my, executive and Wall Street experience. And as of last year, as I mentioned earlier to you folks in our chat, I actually do this. I call it as a full-time, but it's a full-time work, but it's not full-time job. It's my true calling, and that's what I do. I'm just happier than ever, although I've been pretty happy in my life, but this is the best time of my life now.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And you mentioned something here about the optimistic gene. Is it that do we have optimistic genes? Is this something that we find inside ourselves, or this we're born with? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
As a being even deeper involved in research, I'm going to hand this to Lisa if she's okay, because she will probably go much deeper in research than I would. Or not much deep, but let Lisa explain, and I'll comment on.
Okay, please.
I would love, Braco, for you to comment on this, because you are one of the most genuine, happiest people I know, and it just radiates from you. And so it's really interesting to hear you say that you might come by this, naturally. I think what the research shows us, there is no one single gene that is coded for happiness. Like, we know that for sure. It's probably a combination of a whole bunch of things: genetic factors, health factors, neurotransmitters. Like, there's a whole bunch of things involved here. It's very, very complex. But what the research does tell us is that certain people do seem to have a predisposition for being more naturally optimistic and sunnier. And certain people have a predisposition for being more, pessimists never call themselves pessimists, right? They call themselves realists. So people do have more of a disposition, and they're both evolutionarily adaptive. There are good reasons why our ancestors would have been more optimistic and hopeful. They would have gone out into the wilderness, and they would have gone exploring, and they would have found new food sources, for example. Like, there's an advantage to that. There's also an advantage to being more pessimistic and more cautionary. You would have stayed at home, and you would have protected against predators. And so a tribe would absolutely need both of those. And our ancestors who were too pessimistic, they never would have continued on, because they wouldn't have met other people. They wouldn't have continued their genetic pool. They wouldn't have had offspring. And people who were too optimistic would have taken unnecessary risks. And they would have gone out into the wilderness and said, oh, a saber-toothed tiger, it looks so cute, maybe it will be my friend. And they would have, gotten themselves killed. So there is a very natural range within humanity, and it's important that we see the advantages of both. Neither of them are going to be really helpful for us if we get stuck in there. But it is important to recognize that, there are some people who are more naturally optimistic and some people who are more naturally pessimistic, and that's perfectly fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, this is quite insightful. Bracho,
Yeah,
please.
definitely is. So what from my perspective, the reason I said, because my mom was like truly uh, a optimistic woman, but she
Mhm.
was what I would call a grounded optimism. It wasn't because it's not like here's my story, a true story. So we came to New York. Look, life was terrible. I was a messenger after leaving my business, all the money on the account. I mean, like really, we had no. It was hard. All right, we live on what, $800, an apartment for 700. So we would go by. Some of you who live in New York or know New York, West Broadway, it's like beautiful galleries, and there was one big sign. It says, "Don't worry, be happy." And I would just tell my wife, "You see, everything will be fine." And she goes, "What do you mean everything will be fine?" Right? So that everything will be fine doesn't work for a lot of people. Don't tell when people go through bad time, everything happens for easy, it'll be fine. No, it won't, right? So, but everything will be fine because remember 15, so like based on the fact. So remember 15 years ago, my dear, we were in very difficult situation. We lost this, and that, and we took actions. We did this, and that. And because of that, I believe everything will be fine.
Yes.
So it's totally different shift. It's not just, oh, I'll be optimistic, everything is okay. And as Lisa said, we need both. You want pilot to be optimistic. Oh, don't worry, guys, everything will be fine. No, right? We don't want them to be optimistic. So there is a place for both, and that's really important. Just like there's a place for every single emotion that we have. Thanks for bringing it, Lisa. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Everything will be fine. What a positive mindset, and what a journey overall. Wow. So from your perspective, what, if I may ask now, as a follow up on optimistic genes, what would be the definition of positive psychology, and what areas of life do you think they cover and affect? And are there any general benefits of having this kind of positive psychology the whole time? So whoever, Lisa, please.
I maybe I'll start with what is positive psychology, and then Brazil, I'd love you to chime in and turn it over to you for the areas that it's applicable to life, because you touch on so much in your great academy. Positive psychology started out as an area of research. And Martin Seligman was elected to be president of the American Psychology Association, kind of 97, 98, somewhere in there. And he said what psychology was missing was a psychology of strengths. Psychology, up until that point, especially after World War II, had been really good at diagnosing personality disorders, mental disabilities, and so on.
Mm,
All the things that take someone from negative on the spectrum into the positives. Really important, especially when you consider veterans coming home and returning to their home countries after World War II. That was a big shift for psychology. But Martin Seligman recognized that there was really nothing that was bringing people from the low positives, like if you were about a 3 or a 5, into the higher positives, like a +7 or a +8. Psychology had very little to say there. And he said, we need more research into strengths. We need more research into what makes life worth living. Now, he was standing on the shoulders of other researchers like and other psychologists like William James and Abraham Maslow, and on the shoulders of a lot of ancient philosophers like Aristotle, and this whole notion of eudaimonia and hedonia and what makes for a good life and what makes for a virtuous life. That way of thinking had been around for a long time. But I would say what Martin Seligman really did is he got a bunch of researchers together and he said, we need to learn more about this. So it started out as a descriptive field of research. Now you can imagine what happens when a bunch of researchers start publishing mass media books on this. People said, how can I be happier? And so they started reading Martin Seligman's book about learned optimism, or Sonia Lyubomirsky's book about the how of happiness, or Barb Fredrickson's book on positivity. And now it's turned into more of a prescriptive, like we have learned this about optimistic people. We have learned this about the virtuous life. And now through academies like Brazos, we wonder how can we teach this and share this with other people so that, like you said, Waleed, it becomes applicable in different areas of life. So at that point, I'd love to turn it over to Brazzo for your comments on where you use this and how your many students have been applying it.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, so I think what's really important, as you just explained how it started, and you gave a beautiful definition. So we know what positive psychology is now. And I started the same way, reading, hundreds of pages of research papers and trying to understand and figure out what can I do with this so I can help people. That was really how I started. So for me, I'm really not like a researcher, but for me, it was more like taking this and interpreting and taking to the street, if you will. So I think what's really important, it's almost like we can divide maybe even our listeners. I know Lisa and I have a lot of listeners, and kind of I see it in almost like two groups. So you have people who love the research, who love to dig deep, and I really encourage everybody, even if you don't love it, to read as much as you can, to study as much as you can, because that will help you move to what I would call now the next level. And the next level really is to changing our lives. It's really, sometimes I'll say, look, actually, without naming the individual, I spoke to a well-known researcher recently who basically said, I'm so grateful for you folks to taking the research to the next level, because I get the funding or grant, what's it called, right? I finish my research and I move to the next one. I have no clue. I was like, you are well known, man. He's like, no, I'm not. I said, yes. So basically he said, I just moved to the next research. I don't know what happened to my research. And this is where we come in, right? To try to take that and take these, hundreds of pages of research. What, Talman Shahar used to say, only 5 people read my research paper, my wife, my mom, my brother, So it's like people don't read that a lot, quite frankly, right? Because it's also hard to read for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's where my thing is. And also it's getting that knowledge, getting the skills is the key, right? Having the right attitude to apply that knowledge and skills is the key. And now it's application. And that's really where, kind of my work comes in mostly. How do I help people to apply what these people spend years of studying and researching and publishing their work?
And I would add in there that if somebody does want to apply positive psychology to their lives, and you want to work with someone else, or you want to go through a program to do it, it's really important to know that that program or that person is research based. So like you just heard, Grazio has read the original research. He talks to the original researchers. That adds that quality. I'm a practitioner myself. When I speak, it's from a basis of research. The programs that I deliver, the coaching that I do is from a basis of research. And it's important to recognize that's where positive psychology is rooted. And you can't just call yourself, a positive psychology practitioner or say that you're doing positive psychology if you haven't gone back to look at that research. And there's lots of great resources out there. Like I mentioned, a bunch of books. There are videos, there are TED Talks. Like compared to when I started this journey in 2009, the positive psychology world has exploded. And so it's really important to be a conscientious consumer and make sure that the source is research based.
And Elisa, what's interesting what you just said is, it really is. So there are so many books, there are so many videos, there are so many, right? That's so true. But yet, you and I started, and I still recommend people by reading research papers. Still, so you and I still saying, hey, you want to get deep and really understand, get, or as you said, learn from somebody who really is, who understands research and who also applies in their life like you and I do. I mean, really, this is my whole thing about coaching was, don't learn something and now you coach. No, you're not, right? No. Just because you have some skills or knowledge, you got to apply it in your life. Does it work? And maybe you can be a coach.
Well, and that's another really important part, Grazio, because the research is starting to get very nuanced. And we're finding that there are certain positive interventions, is what we call them. There are certain positive interventions that work for a certain group of people. Like they might work really well for women, but not so well for men. Or they might work really well for adults, but not so well for teenagers. Or they might work really well in a culture like the United States, but not in a culture like China. And so you have the research continues to find these nuances. It is not a one size fits all.
I totally agree, and one of the things that I'm thinking with you while you're saying that is, people listening to us right now, they are not researchers, but they are people who are receiving information and
Mhm.
taking it from research to application. As a researcher is very different from as a recipient of this kind of information. So that now that people are a little bit familiar with what positive psychology is from our conversation, I'm sure along your journeys you've used tons of tools to master positive psychology. Could you, on a personal level, tell me what are your like top recommended positive psychology tools that you have used along your process to be able to interpret it from research into an actual application in your life?
Grazio, what do you do?
Yeah.
You know, so what do I do personally? I think one of the tools that I started like years ago was that gratitude letter, and that's the one that like a lot of my
Mm.
students find it really interesting. Um, there's a lot of research on gratitude, and I also did for years. Well, I did a different, I
Mhm.
still do, but like I had just I didn't go as deep as research would suggest, and we don't have
Mhm.
time now to go to it. But I had a little notebook. They had a tiny little space, and it would only allow me to spend like a 15 seconds to put 3 bullets, and that was
Please.
next to my uh, my nightstand. It had a good working pen that I know it's not going to stop working, so I don't have to get up because I wouldn't. I mean, all of this was like, and then I would just spend that 10, 15 seconds, write it down every night. I also do gratitude exercise, which is very weird, in the shower. So, like, I will yell and scream as I take a shower. And I remember one time our son came over. He's married now, has 2 kids. And he said to my wife, "Is that okay? Like, why is he screaming?" But that works for me. Things that smile, that may not be just exact positive psychology tool, but we know that will bring us some dopamine. I'll just go downstairs in my studio and I'll smile, I'll jump. So there are some basic things that you may just call it, hey, will bring us feeling good. And there are some more very specific, more research based tools, and I'm sure Lisa will, from her
Yes. What
perspective.
about you, Lisa? Yes, please.
Yeah, so there's a few things that I've done, and positive psychology has grown so much. So, one of the things that I do is what I call catching other people doing things right. And for me, this is a thread through a lot of positive psychology. So, when I get really upset with someone, and I also have 2 kids, they're older now, not quite as old and moved out, but they're 18 and 20. I deliberately go and tell them when I notice that they've done something right or when they've done something well. And I really appreciate that. And I've been doing
Mhm.
that for years as a parent. And I've been suggesting this to their teachers along the way as well. And it changes relationships, it changes your focus. One of my sons had a very difficult time through school. And I remember speaking to his elementary school teachers. So my son would have been like 6, 7, 8 years old at this time. And I
Mhm.
suggested to his teachers that maybe they could just let him know when he's doing something well. And the teachers who did that, it changed everything. And when I catch people doing things right and I express that gratitude or that recognition or that praise or that compliment, like you just see people light up and it helps me to feel good as well. And like Bracho's gratitude, positivity intervention, like that's changing his brain. That helps his brain to look for more of the good stuff. And when you
Mhm.
catch people doing things right, it does the same sort of thing. It's, in the military, they teach this, they call it hunt the good stuff. It does change your brain. But the other things that I do, and there's some new research coming up. A lot of positive psychology so far has been very cognitive. We call it neck up psychology. It's all about the brain. And that
Mhm.
makes sense because a lot of the original researchers, they come from a cognitive background. But now there's a lot of neck down psychology, and we have to recognize that we are, in some ways, animals. We are, in some ways, creatures of nature. And so I do a lot more walks, I do a lot more movement. I do a lot more getting out into nature and into the sunshine. I live in Canada. We have a lot of cold, dark days here, and I live in the southern part of Canada. Like, I can't even imagine if you live further north than I do, like much of the population does around the world. A lot of Europe is much further north than I am. So when I can get out into the sunshine, I take pictures of a lot of nature. I'm happy to be able to live by a lake. We have flowers coming up, the spring flowers right now in my area, and to be able to appreciate that and savor that. That's something I know the pandemic has been extremely hard for so many people, but it allowed me to get out for more walks and to appreciate more nature. And that was good for my happiness and mental well being as well.
Wow, wow. I love the part of catching other people doing things right. I think we need to focus on that. We're always catching what people are doing wrong and having painful conversations about them. So thank you so much. And I'm sure those tools are going to come in very handy once we all start including positive psychology into our lives. So let me just remind everyone from our viewers from across the world that you are welcome to send your questions here on live on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We will be answering them towards the end of the conversation. So this takes me.
Oh, and Brazio had something. Yeah.
Ah, please, please,
I
please.
did, and now I have to remember, what did I have? I just want. I just wanted to add one thing, for listeners and just for people, what Lisa and I were just talking about, what works for us. But what I would like people to do, to really, the easiest exercise, to think about what you do from the time you wake up to time you go to sleep, and think about things that brings you good mood. I don't care what that is. I don't care. I mean, honestly, we talk about psychology, but it doesn't have to be, a lot of research behind it. Something that makes you feel good. Chances are there is research behind a lot of these things, right? So something that makes you feel good and do more of it. It's a simple. Like if you don't want to study, with us, all this stuff, just do something that makes you feel good, brings you positive emotions. And
this actually, go ahead, please.
No, please.
No. It's actually takes me to my next question, which is basically a world post a pandemic that needs somehow an updated system of how people react with each other, how people work. So you mentioned, Lisa, change management, human resource departments. How do they handle the aftermath of everything? So can positive psychology be applied on an organizational level, on a personal level post this pandemic? And how could that be?
Absolutely. One of the other things, I get excited about a lot of things. I read and study a lot of things. Every time Grazio and I speak, it's like a totally new topic and we go in all these crazy directions. So Grazio will not be surprised to hear. Some of the things that I've gotten very interested in recently are design thinking and systems thinking. And when I take a look at organizations, what I think positive psychology has done really well over the past 20, 25 years is looking at individual interventions. So what can an individual do, or how can they think differently, or how can they behave differently in order to have more well-being in their life? And that's great. It's a great place to start. Lots of really grounded research there. But when you get into the organizational world, the research is messy. A world event like a pandemic changes your findings, and that makes the research really hard to do. But when we take a look at organizations through a systems lens, which is a lot of what I consult on, we can say, what are the systems and processes, and have they been designed with well-being in mind? So well-being organizationally is not necessarily yoga classes. It's not resilience classes. It's not telling individuals, oh, just be nicer to each other. It's looking at systems and saying, how easy do we make it for people to get paid? How easy do we make it for people to access benefits? When we incentivize people, how is our reward structure set up? And are we incentivizing behaviors that are actually well-being? I remember a bunch of years ago, I worked in an organization, this will make you laugh. I worked in an organization where they were coming up with their values. And one of their values, this was like 20 years ago, one of their values was work-life balance. So amazing. So what the organization decided to do is they were going to have a month focused on each of their top 6 values. Well, the announcement that came out from the VP to announce that this was the month of work-life balance came out at 9 p.m. on a Sunday. Now, I work in a part of the world where the standard working hours are Monday to Friday, kind of 8 to 5 sort of thing. And this email came out in the evening on a Sunday. And it just set the wrong tone. And we have to take a look at what is it that we're doing and what is the message that we're sending when we do things like that. Now, in the defense of the VP, that could have been legitimately their work life balance, and work life balance is very messy. We need to recognize that some of us work life balance is attending to your emails on the Sunday evening before you show up on Monday, because then you show up on Monday with a better peace of mind. But that doesn't mean that you should send it out at that time to thousands of people for whom that is not work life balance. And there's a very natural reaction that when you get an email from a VP, you want to read it, right? Because there's something going on there. So let's take a look at how our systems are set up, how our systems are designed, and recognizing that positive psychology in an organization is more than just a series of events. It's actual intentional systems design of how organizations work.
Wow, that's very insightful. And by the way, coming to design thinking, because I'm a certified design thinking coach, so this is
Cool.
one of the things that I got into early on in my career in business. And what you say here is that people need to be very human centered about their
Yes.
human resource approaches post the pandemic, because everyone is different now. Working from home is a new normal, and even some companies. We've heard that Apple, for example, a couple of days ago, a lot of people were resigning because they are asking people to come back to office. And the human resources need to be human centered around what people actually need, and what positivity that they actually need to go on with their work. So how about you, Bracho? Can positive psychology be applied in an organizational level, and how, in your opinion?
So I am so glad Lisa actually already started this discussion that I was going to say, which is, as you said, positive psychology was focused on individuals. And even when it started focusing on organization, it was just looking at the organization. So after looking all of this research and what was done, especially me spending, 40 years on like top, primarily like Wall Street companies in the world, I realized that that's not enough. And what we needed to combine these two. So I developed a framework for organizational and employee well-being. I have these 8 pillars that I call, and basically they are all that we know and learn and teach in positive psychology. From relationships to optimism to mindfulness to gratitude, strength, happiness, right? But then what I did is I broke it down to here's for employees what that, start from happiness, which is just one pillar, what that really means. What does it mean for organization? Now, what does happiness mean for organization? Every organization, even if a non-for-profit, it's looking for the bottom line. Quite frankly, do they care about my happiness? They don't. They're looking at but that's reality. I mean, they can tell you otherwise. I know they do, but that's reality. Especially if you look at, here in the West, and again, I'm not. So basically, but then how can I help them improve their bottom line, and at the same time that they can help their employees become happier? What can I do with relationships pillar that I can help company improve their bottom line, and at the same time they will help employees improve their relationships? So it's basically merging these two, and I had a really, really great success. Just a couple of days ago, I had the one presentation with fintech, what we call financial technology company, right? And as you know, and honestly, with fintech, there is really no 9 to 5. People work crazy hours, and I did for like 15 years. But it was really refreshing. And then you look at what they do today. You can't just come in and present. Elisa and I had a lot of this discussion as well. Some folks have one presentation. They come in and here's what I do. No. So I spent so much time analyzing, really understanding what is their CEO thinking. I mean, of course I care what the employee wants, but unless CEO's thinking is at least a little bit aligned, I'm not even going to present, because they're not going to do anything. They'll just say, we're doing this for, well-being. They'll pay me and they think they're done. So that's how I look at it. There's a lot of work that we can and should do there, and we are doing. It's just going to take us a while.
And I want to do two shout outs here. One is to the University of Michigan. They have a Center for Positive Organizational Scholarship. And their scholars and researchers go into organizations, they do research, they do interventions, and they really have demonstrated, like Braco says, that when you have the championship, when you have the positive leadership, not only does your workplace well-being increase, but so does your profitability. So do the bottom line metrics that CEOs and CFOs and a lot of private organizations care about. So the research is there. If you're good to your people will be good to you. And then the second shout out I want to do is a book called Profit from the Positive by Margaret Greenberg and Senya Mayman. They are also Master of Applied Positive Psychology graduates, the same program that I did. I was in class 5, Waleed. These people were in class 1. They are positive psychology pioneers. And they
Wow.
wrote this great book, Profit from the Positive, which explains how organizations can leverage positive psychology for the benefit of all. So there are some great resources, again, based in research that organizations can use. And like Braco says, like if I come in and I do a 1-day training with you, it's great. You're going to have a good time. You're going to feel, you're going to feel uplifted. You're going to feel energized. You're going to leave feeling like the world is a better place and like there's lots you can do. But when you go back to the workplace, your workplace hasn't changed. Your boss hasn't changed. Your peers haven't changed. The environment around you hasn't changed. And so everything that you learn in a workshop with either of us is, and Braco, I'm thinking we need to co-facilitate some stuff together.
Yeah, I keep thinking it's
And you know,
Invite
we do an awesome job and you'll have an awesome experience. But
me.
unless the systems also change, you're not going to be able to reinforce those positive changes. And
Yeah.
then, you know, I'm happy to take your money, but you're not going to get your ROI on that.
So the takeaway is positive leadership, and please, entrepreneurs, read Profit from the Positive. It's very helpful.
Well, and
Okay.
I love working with entrepreneurs. Waleed, we were talking about this just a little bit before we started.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs have an amazing opportunity to start from the ground up. You can start from zero and you can be intentional about how you build and grow and develop that team. We know that investors, yes, they're looking at your product and your service and your financial business model and everything like that, but they're also looking at the founding team. And they're saying, do I believe in these people? I do a lot of coaching on high performance teams. There's a lot of research out there on what makes high performance teams. Entrepreneurs, you have a golden opportunity to start in the way that you intend to grow and build in positive psychology right from the very beginning. It's going to make your business better. It's going to make you feel better. And it's going to make you more attractive potentially to investors. Like this is a big win.
Because at the
you know
end of
what
the day,
most
I agree.
companies.
Yes, Brett show, please. Yes.
I apologize.
No.
I
Go
just had
ahead.
to jump in. But most companies say, well, our people are the biggest asset. It's just
Right.
a piece of paper, right? But if you can really make that, and as Lisa said, the investor come in and they do see that your people are the biggest asset because you treat them as your biggest asset, and that's why they produce so well. So that makes a difference. Yeah. Thanks, Lisa, for mentioning
Wow.
this.
No. I totally agree, and I've had that experience also in my company. When you're not, when people are not cultivated, they eventually don't, like I've had the in my company during COVID, we had the challenge of, because we are a company that works in the travel tech sector, so we had the challenge to stop the company of operating for a while. And during that time, we saw the leverage of how, when you're very open with your people and you're very caring of your team, and this is something I try to be as much as possible. In the beginning, they were like, okay, let's work the next few months without some getting paid. Let's push this until we survive, and we did survive COVID, and this was a huge success. So you would not have that kind of ownership from your employees if you don't embed into them that your presence is as profitable as just making money from the company itself.
Absolutely. In my organizational development world and in my coaching world, there's a few things that come up over and over again. One
Mm,
is, and this is a very standard finding, I think the Gallup organization and many others have found this, that people leave companies because they leave in large because of their managers. It's not because of pay, it's not because of benefits, they leave because of managers. And so one difficult individual can have an outsized impact. And I've
mm,
also seen people who stay at a company, even though they could go work somewhere else for more money, more scope of authority, more interesting jobs. I've seen people stay at an organization because they are appreciated, because they
mm,
get growth and development opportunities, because they like the people that they work with. They find meaning and purpose there. They believe in what they are doing. And that
mm,
outweighs a pay increase. So people will go to a job because of money, but they will stay because of the people and because of the high performing teams and the meaning and
mm.
purpose.
So Lisa,
Amazing.
here's what we need to now dig deeper next time we chat.
Yeah, yeah,
So I agree with absolutely. People leave. Number one reason is people leave because of their manager, direct report. Here's the real issue that I've seen in real life. And again, I'm talking New York, Wall Street. Again, I'm not talking small companies, but this is my experience. Here's the issue. That manager, that is the reason that a lot of people left, is the one who's very good to his or her manager. He's a
right.
big producer. So his or her manager honestly doesn't care. That's what
Mm,
we need to fill that gap. And this is what happens a lot in organizations. And I have so many real life examples. I even have I had discussion with a big CTO from former CTO from uh, one of the largest Wall Street company the other day. He's a friend of mine now. And I asked him, I said, for such a, he was talking about one of his direct. And I said, I just wonder, did you ever came across that maybe he wasn't as good to his people as you would think? And he goes, well, I would know that. See, these people believe I would know that. so so that's something we need to fix if we need to fix this organization.
Absolutely. It's the competent jerk problem.
Yes, thank you.
Right? They're so good at hitting their numbers and bringing in the multi-million dollar deals, but they're not good to the people around them. And they're very good at managing up, leveraging that relationship with their boss. And
mm,
something I've seen in some organizations trying to get at this are what we call skip level meetings. I haven't seen any research on the effectiveness of it, but basically the idea is that the plus one, if you will, has meetings with their direct reports, and so you
mm,
have these skip level meetings to assess how things are going well. Now, that takes us, no surprise, into the area of psychological safety. Like, are you comfortable telling your boss's boss that your boss is a competent jerk? Yes, they're good at hitting the numbers, but they cause toxicity for a whole bunch of people underneath them. So,
mm.
yeah, there's some systemic issues there that we need to be looking at.
Actually, it's a very interesting topic, and I think one of the things that we could possibly do in future lives like this is actually discuss positive psychology in workplace, because this is very much
Yeah.
needed. Your insights are quite amazing. Thank you so much for those. So, going on to our next question. So, all sciences across history had evolved with time and might have slightly become more important than others based on so many givens. So, how has positive psychology evolved in importance since it was first entered, or since you first entered the field? Lisa.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anecdotally, and anybody who wants to go on Google Ngram, like just do a search for positive psychology, it looks like a hockey stick. Like it just, and I'm Canadian, obviously, hockey sticks are big things here. It just goes flat and then goes whoop, like exponential growth.
Wow.
Here's my own personal story about that. So, as I mentioned, I got accepted into the positive psychology master's program in 2009. And I started speaking on positive psychology while I was doing all this learning and development. And I would go into a room and I would speak to hundreds of people at a conference. And I would say, how many of you have heard of positive psychology? And out
Mm,
of a room of 300, I would see maybe 3 hands go up. And these are people who were coaches. These are people who were interested in the topic. very few people 12 years ago had heard about this. And now I walk into a room and I say, a virtual room, and I say, how many of you have heard of positive psychology? Almost all the hands go up. There is
Wow.
an awareness. Now, I will also say, and I bet Braco sees this a lot, there's also a misconception of what positive psychology is, and that it's happyology and it's about being happy all the time. And, positive psychology includes resilience. It includes grit, which is hard work. It's passion and perseverance for a difficult goal over time.
Mm.
It's post-traumatic growth. Like, positive psychology has always recognized that very difficult things in life happen to you. And so I think there are some nuances that are still not understood, but as a field, it has exploded. Way
Mm.
more research out there, way more grants out there, way more books out there, which again goes back to what we were talking about before. Like, people who are listening to this video cast, you need to be a very conscientious consumer, because there are also a lot of people who recognize that positive psychology is a search term, and they kind of sprinkle it in liberally without really being aware of what it is or how it works. But yeah, it has grown tremendously. And the other exciting thing for me is that it's become a lot more cross-cultural. So people think that this is something that's out of the States, and the US has, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness baked into its history. And so they think happiness, oh, that's just an American thing. But then you read research saying, well, what does this mean for German adults? What does this mean in the Middle East? What does this mean in China? What does
Love
this
to
mean
know.
in all these other countries? And
Mm.
so it's gotten very considerably more diverse, which is also exciting.
Yes, would love to hear your thoughts, Bracho, but also I love the point of cross-cultural. And I think since we have so many viewers from the Middle East, and some people would argue that, oh, positive psychology, it's like a Western idea, and yeah, we are in a developing country, and we have so much to think about. And is it something that we should like incorporate in our life? We should worry about health and wellness in general, but not on our mental level. How does this speak to you, Bracho? But also I would love to hear your thoughts
Well,
on
and
the
maybe
importance.
just before Bracho speaks, I'm just going to
Yeah,
do a shout out to a researcher who's in the Middle East. Her name
yeah.
is Louise Lambert. I can't remember exactly where she is. She's originally Canadian, but she's moved to the
Mhm.
Middle East. And I believe she has created a Middle East journal of positive psychology. So if anyone wants to look her up, she's doing tremendous work in the Middle East. Sorry, Bracho.
No, no, don't be sorry. I had no clue that she's in the Middle East now. I always thought she's around here. Oh, cool. She moved there. Yeah,
Yeah.
nice, nice.
So
So
yeah. Oh yeah. Go ahead, please.
no, so I think by reaching people in this, like I said, 182 countries, it's a testament of people all over the world want to know and learn about positive psychology. I
Mm.
also, honestly, when I kind of leave that research behind, I also want to give, here's the interesting fact. We have a people from East, from India, from countries that have been practicing meditation and mindfulness forever, come to us. I was like, why are you learning mindfulness from me, on meditation? But it's interesting. I think that, that combination of these two, we know that some people have been practicing certain tools for hundreds of thousands of years. Now we have a research, because in the West we got a research. Now we have a research to prove that, hey, these are all the great benefits. Now we have people going back and forth between these two, and really combining, practice with the research. And I love that. I certainly think there is a place everywhere for the tools that it doesn't matter who develops them. Is it West? Is it East? Whatever works for us, right? As human beings. If it works for me to make me a life worth living and better life, I'm going to try it, right? I'm going to try it. It may or may not work for me. And then the other
Mm.
thing is, what I like to say is that a lot of these tools that people going to learn about, they may or may not work for you. I mean, that's really a reality. So if they say, well, research shows this, and if you talk optimism, well, 50% are genes. Well, I don't know. For you, it's maybe 23.8. Like, people, sometimes they don't understand research, so they get stuck with these numbers. And even, Sonia Lubomirsky said, oh, please don't forget about the numbers that I gave you before.
It was
Right?
a thought experiment. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So people need to be aware if they really want to study deep that to understand it. And as Lisa mentioned, I think it's really important that people don't just sparkle this positive psychology all over the place and they think it's happyology and let us all be just smiling and be happy. No, it's really not. It's really not. And that's it's important message that Lisa sent out that everybody should get it.
Yeah. And one of the other things I want to build on what Braco just said about, the science, and in the West, we have certain scientific ways of testing things. I think the way that science is getting practiced in these areas of social sciences and humanities is even expanding. So in my part of the world, there's a lot of indigenous ways of knowing and two-eyed seeing. And how do we marry the standard kind of scientific process with more indigenous ways of knowing? And what does that have to say about positive psychology? I mean, that's a brand new emerging area that has really interesting potential. And different areas around the world have different ways of knowing and conducting research. And we want to keep diving into that. And what does that say about positive psychology and well-being?
Wow. Yes. And since we are speaking about change and evolution, or you'd say it in happyology or in positive psychology, I might as well ask you what would you like to see in the world of positive psychology in the years to come, Lisa?
Oh, if I could wave my magic wand, what would I want to see in the world of positive psychology? I would certainly want to see more of that systems thinking. And I would want to see more of, what Braco says is like, let's learn more about what is it that works for a wide variety of people. Because the research, I mean, up until recently, we really only had about 12 research-based positive interventions. There must be more out there. And, the other thing is that in order to get the research published, like you have to show significant results and, all these sorts of things. But there are probably things out there that work for a very small niche of people, and we should not be discounting those. So I'd like to see more acknowledgement of all of that as well.
How about you, Braco?
Yeah, I agree with Lisa 100%. We'd like to see just more people being aware of what we do. Just being aware, it would be the first step, and decide if that's something for them to try, and then to give it a shot. To For folks who apply and or teach, to kind of push this as much as we can everywhere. So it's not just individual, it's not just organization, it's not just in US, it's really across a multicultural, all over the world, all different. Even when we talk about organizations, I always say there is a big difference. You have, even when I teach this these 8 pillars of organizational employee well-being, it's different in not just in every organization, every sector, every organization, every business unit, every smaller business units, IT versus finance versus accounting. So we really need to dig a little bit deeper into what that really means and how we can provide these tools to really be used in the right way. I think that's one thing that I worry about, as we mentioned earlier, right? Sometimes people will push this and teach it and they don't really understand it.
Are there any, and this is a question to both of you, are there any solid case studies on how, you've mentioned some of the books, Lisa, but are there clear case studies on how positive psychology has impacted workplaces, has impacted individuals, has impacted maybe addiction, all these kinds of things? Are there case studies that cover those topics?
There absolutely are. And one of the things that I would encourage people to do, if you're interested in learning more about this, is take a look at people who have graduated from the many master's programs in positive psychology around the world. I've mentioned the University of Pennsylvania, that's my own alma mater, but there are several programs, I'm going to say probably about 20 or 25 programs now around the world. And they are taking positive psychology into all these different areas, like addictions, like incarcerated populations, like into very poor areas, places that you you wouldn't think positive psychology is a natural fit. And so there are wonderful case studies out there. And everybody that I have met in the world of positive psychology is very generous with their time, with their information. So find somebody on LinkedIn or find them on an alumni listing or whatever it is, and just follow up with them and just ask them, like, what is it that you have done? What is it that you have seen? And like Braco has said, like, go read the books, go find the research. It is absolutely out there. And I'll just put out there, like, if someone watching this or listening to this is very interested in a specific area, find me. Even if it's not my area, I'll find someone who's in that, and I'm very happy to make an introduction for you.
Thank you so much for such
And
generous
if you would
offer.
like me to give you the best place to find any research, call Lisa. That's what I do. Anything I need, I was like, Lisa, does this exist? She's like, yeah, in 5 minutes, boom, here's a link to research. I was like, how do you find this? Yeah, she's the best.
I do my best to stay on top of it. That's for sure.
Super. So currently it's time to take some questions from our viewers. And we have here a question from Andrea Moctezuma. And let me show it on the screen. So she's asking, what tools do you recommend to reinforce positive recognition? Lisa and Braco.
Oh, that's interesting, Andrea. So I'm not sure if I'm interpreting the question properly. And Andrea, please let me know if I'm not quite getting at what this is. But one of the things that I like to do when I'm teaching people about catching other people doing things right and that positive recognition is I introduce them to the language of strengths. And there are a number of different strengths assessments out there. People may be familiar with VIA Character Strengths, which is a free online assessment. Just Google search VIA Character Strengths or go to viacharacter.org. You can do a free assessment. It is a research database. You will be asked to create a profile and to input certain demographic information, but you will get your 24 top strengths. You can also do the Gallup organization's Clifton Strengths Finder. There is a cost associated with that, and the cost varies depending on the sort of report that you want. But you can also read just what are the Gallup strengths. There's also Standout, which is by Marcus Buckingham. There's another one that I think is now called Strengths Profile, that's out of the UK. There's a whole bunch of different strengths tools out there. Now, I'm not recommending you go and take all of them, but read through the strengths and develop a language of positive recognition. Sometimes what we do when we're trying to positively recognize something that someone else has done or the person is we say things like, good job, well done, way to go. And we think we have caught somebody doing things right, but it's not specific enough. It's not really recognizing that person or that effort. And the language of strengths can really help you attune to what is going right with people.
Amazing, amazing. Would you like to add something, Braco?
Lisa already said everything. Like I said, I do for most of my clients, I'll recommend them to go and usually VIA because it's free. And then I would have them look at the top 5, bottom 5, then we discuss, because people always worry, oh, why am I terrible at, spirituality? I'm a spiritual person. So we don't have time to discuss, but that doesn't mean that you are bad at anything. There are 24 and some have to be on the bottom. That's the
and you have all of the strengths. Everybody has all of the strengths. It's just some give you more energy and they're more natural for you. That's all.
Right. And if I would, again, if I understood the question correctly, so if I would talk to Lisa and I want to give her positive recognition, I would say something like, Lisa, you are really enthusiastic about positive psychology. And the reason I said that is because you just proved that in today's show. So I would tell her strength and I would give her evidence.
Yes.
Not just you enthusiastic or you good doesn't mean anything.
The Center for Creative Leadership, I believe, has a model they call SBI, Situation, Behavior, and Impact. And that typically a lot of feedback, because this is my area of research, a lot of feedback interventions are designed for when things go poorly. Like you talked about, Waleed, like we notice when things are broken, there's a negativity bias, fine. But we can also use that SBI model, the situation, the behavior, and the impact to deliver positive recognition as well.
Amazing, amazing. So let's close it on a high note, and I would love to hear final remarks, a finer message from each of you to our viewers regarding positive psychology. If there was one message, what would that be?
I think my one message is you've got to get to know Braco more and his Life Success Academy and go and look it up, because just going onto his website and learning about his program is a positive intervention. And Braco, thank you so much for continuing to connect and to work with me. And I wish everybody all the best. Honestly, reach out if there is anything at all. We've covered so much of a range. The world of positive psychology is so big. I hope everybody has taken something away from our conversation today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Bracho.
You know, it just something popped to my mind. And first, I want to thank Lisa. And again, like I said, we're not just, going back and forth, but again, Lisa is, and I was told, actually, when I started studying post psychology, I was told, get in touch with Lisa. She's like the best person to know in post psychology. Uh, One thing I was thinking, and sometimes I teach this, but I mean, sometimes I bring this in my lectures. But one thing I was thinking of Peter Drucker, who most of us know as, the man who invented the management. That's what Business Week called him. And as he was getting older, he wasn't able to travel the world. So he would invite the world leaders for 3-day weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? And on Friday, he would tell them, on Monday, don't call me and tell me how great it was. Tell me, what are you doing differently? So I'm going to ask the same question for the listeners. I hope you're going to say it was great, but what we really want to hear is, what are you doing differently based on what you learned today?
Wow, wow. And what a better way to end the conversation with what are we doing differently? And I think everyone tomorrow morning, they are going to be waking up and asking that question. So at the end of this panel, I'd like to sincerely thank you, our guests, Lisa Sansom and Braco Pobric, for such an insightful and beneficial conversation. This would, without doubt, greatly help our global audience find their way into a more positive mindset. Also, thank you to our viewers from all across the world watching us today. And be sure to follow our guests via their bio links, reach out to them. You will find all their details in the panel flyers on all Food for Thought channels. And for any further questions you may have to our guests, just place them anytime in the comments sections below, and we'll get back to them and to you. This is Waleed Hatim tuning in from Cairo, Egypt on the first ever Happiness Summit. Please enjoy your morning or evening wherever you are, and stay tuned for our next session starting again in 30 minutes. See you soon and have a good day. Bye-bye. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Braco.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.